Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about prepping your material. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how would you go about preparing to present a new technical topic to a group of experienced software engineers, especially when you aren't confident about the topic? Well, so first and foremost, I would approach it as a humble thing. In a sense, it's a little bit what I do here on the channel. So the thing is, guys, like when I talk to you and I explain things and I try to share my thoughts on things, I'm fully aware of that there are more than one perspective on that topic, and I am also fully aware of that I'm not a master of every single thing that people ask me about and so forth. But I try to present my reasoning for believing something, not as a I'm not from the position of I'm an expert and you are a beginner and therefore you should listen to me. I'm not trying to persuade you to believe what I say with authority, which is one of the classic ones where you take the role of an expert and you're teaching someone, like a teacher in school or like a legal representative talking to a customer, to a client, or a doctor to a patient and things like that. That's not the relationship I want to establish with you guys. The relationship that happens usually starts by me saying, this is my rational way of thinking about this based on my experiences. The authority part of the thing that makes you believe me or like so forth is not based on the fact that I have a fancy title somewhere. Like if you haven't noticed, I don't actually, like, I'm not sure if anybody of you have actually checked what my background, what my CV says, but unless you have, how would you know if I know the first thing about software development? Well, hopefully it comes from the rationality of my thoughts, the way I express them, and the way that my experiences, if they resonate with you, and you are a software developer, well, ergo there, and you probably see that, well, I'm probably one as well, if we have similar sorts of experiences. And you should try to approach this the same way. It is the main reason why I tell junior software developers that I'm not saying you have to do this. It's just something. I had a conversation with a guy who I had a talk with just yesterday, and I was talking about this idea of personal branding. And personal branding doesn't have to be the thing, you know, that the Instagram people are doing, or how people are trying to be influencers these days and make money off of teaching software development and so forth. But what it is about is that you basically just position yourself in as a person going through a set of experiences, and then you allow other people to determine whether or not that makes you an authority on the subject. And they might correct you, they might have different opinions and so forth, but if you don't put yourself in a position where you try to play the expert, you usually go over it's much easier for you to go over well with other people. So in your scenario, like as I just said, as a junior software developer, if you do a tech talk, why would you think that the only tech talk that is worth making is one of those like super tech talks where you talk about like super advanced things that like maybe one or two people in the whole room really understands at a fundamental level? There are plenty of opportunities to just, hey, I tried something weird in React or like in .NET or Java or whatever you like. I did this thing and I thought it was pretty cool. Here is how I did it, and here is sort of, you're basically just going through your experience. That's all you have to do. You have to just tell people what you did and sort of explain your rationality. And if you are wrong, unless you're in a room with full of socially inept douchebags, that will be okay. Because if you are dealing with really senior software developers and you don't present yourself as being either arrogant or as a know-it-all, or you're saying that something's definitive, it's just you just present it as, this is what I did. It's not that unlike having, you know, your kids come and show what they did in arts class or something like that. Either you're going to be really impressed, like the people, like the parents or whoever is looking at it, they're going to be super impressed, because for your level you're pretty smart. And I have done this, guys. I have been in meetings with junior software. I actually remember her still. I had an interview with a junior software developer, and I asked her about unit testing, and I asked her to share her thoughts on unit testing, and her answer, and I'm not kidding you, was the best answer I've ever heard from anybody, and that includes every single senior I have ever talked to. And I told her so. And she was actually moved to the point where I thought she was going to start crying, because she was so taken aback by the fact that me, in this case I was doing the interview, that me, like quote unquote the senior guy who is she has to impress in order to like get the job and so forth, said something as nice as that. And you can do exactly the same thing. I promise you guys, not everybody is out to like judge you because you're not like you're not an expert on something. Because as long as you don't pretend to be the expert when you're not, usually people will in some cases agree with you and see that yeah, you're actually right, or you're onto something. In some cases they will be, yeah, but you're not thinking about this and that, but that's probably okay because you're like a junior. As I said, you can be very impressive even if you're not a master. Being a master is just one way of being impressive and being persuasive and giving value to some people. And don't forget something. Even if you make a tech talk on an intro to something, remember, you don't necessarily know exactly who's in the audience. And there are plenty of very senior people. If you take a look at the sort of conference material you usually see in the Java community, it's actually very common that you see introductions to Node.js, React.js for Java developers, and so forth and so on. These sort of introductionary topics that maybe in the JavaScript community is like, yeah, a million people have done that, but in the Java world or some other community, this might actually not be as mainstream as you think. So what I want you to take away from this is that the way that you present, and I argue that you should always do this, because, or rather you should always demand, even as an observer, that this is the way it's been done. Because too often I see things such as authority and social approval and like popularity and bandwagon mentality and so forth being the thing that convinces people whether or not something has value. This is how trends are started. This is how most of politics are working and things like that, where you don't really get any rational thinking from the people who are doing the presenting. The reason why people get persuaded is because either they seem to be an expert, they're very charismatic, or they have a high title or authority or something like that. And as I said, this is just one way of persuading people or getting people to sort of see a value in the thing that you're trying to pitch. But the other way, which is, I argue, the more noble course, which should be the way we do things, if you ask me, is to just share your thinking process about a specific topic. Explain what you're, what you did, how you did it, what you were thinking, why you were doing it, and sort of what you learned from it. And then if you're dealing with a group of people, in this case, who are more senior than you and so forth, it might be that you show them something that they haven't thought about. Some of it might be useful to them. Maybe everything is super clear to them, and in a worst case, it didn't really give them much from it's not something that they really found all that interesting, which is a risk you run every single day, guys. I make these videos, and I don't. Do you think I think that everything I say is just going to be super interesting to everybody who's on my little channel here? Of course not. But I still do it because for some of you it might be interesting. Some of you it's going to be super boring and uninteresting, and then you just click on the next thing, or you go and watch the next video or do something else. But by just doing this, I don't put myself in a confrontation with you where I'm trying to be an expert and you're trying to learn from me. And you can apply it the same way. You can start your own YouTube channel today, or do a presentation on something that is just at the level that you are. And I promise you, someone's going to find it interesting. Have a great day.